Deep in a shadowed cavern, a young man with white hair and goggles smiled in quiet triumph. After endless searching, he had finally found what he needed. It was ink. He celebrated with his small cat-like companion, Nero. He exclaimed that Nero had done great and that thanks to him the search had paid off. Holding the precious bottle close, he imagined what it could mean. He thought that if he brought this back, the pioneering corps might finally accept him. Far away in the heart of Shining City, crowds roared as a parade of brilliant heroes marched past. Someone in the crowd shouted that a colorist was approaching. Citizens stared with admiration, one of them pointing out how vivid their colors were. Another claimed with confidence that as long as colorists existed, the city would stay safe. But in the grim industrial district, the mood was bleak. K, the young man from the cavern, stood quietly in a long line outside a recruitment center. Without warning he was slammed to the ground. 2 corps members towered over him. One of them barked loudly that he should get lost and that people like him didn't belong there. K scrambled up, clutching the ink. He insisted that he had brought ink to prove his qualifications and asked what the problem was. The man scoffed and said condescendingly that roles were decided at birth and that fools like K, who didn't understand their place, were always trouble. A faint colored aura began to glow around the man as he sneered. His hand flared with red energy. He told K to listen carefully, calling him a damn colorless and claiming that only the chosen had the right to fight the creatures that roamed the dark lands beyond the city. He added that colorists risked everything for humanity and returned as heroes, so someone colorless could never do the same. With a final glare, he told K to act accordingly and stick to colorless work. The heavy doors slammed shut, leaving K alone on the steps. Nero peeked from his jacket, worried, and K forced a smile. He whispered to Nero that he would still become the greatest colorist ever. He gently tucked Nero back inside and sighed. He asked if they should try somewhere else, but every attempt ended the same. He wandered from place to place, crossing out each failed opportunity in his worn notebook. He sighed that it was another miss and accepted that it couldn't be helped. Eventually he found himself before Mari's workshop. He stepped inside and called out that he had returned. Mari, a cheerful young woman in work gear, lifted her goggles and smiled. She asked knowingly if he had failed again. K admitted that he had, while Nero jumped toward her happily. Mari held Nero with an indignant look, saying that people didn't recognize talent when it stood right in front of them. K replied that it didn't matter if no one accepted colorless folks. She insisted that his skills were more than proven. He handed her the ink bottle and her eyes lit up. She said gratefully that she would pay him well. As she poured it into her machinery, she explained that prices had shot up. She mentioned that people kept arguing for more pioneers because everything relied on ink. She looked at him seriously and asked if he had thought about her earlier suggestion. Before he could answer, she slammed a flyer onto the table and claimed that he needed to try everything. She said this could be his chance, an S-rank recruitment. His eyes widened as he read. She smiled and reminded him that if he wanted to be a colorist, this was based on skill. She urged him to give it a try and reminded him that he had been saying this since they were kids. A memory surfaced. A childhood promise whispered in the rain that they would always support him. His resolve tightened. He told her that he couldn't hesitate anymore. He grabbed the flyer and thanked her before heading out. Walking through the dim streets, he studied the page and murmured that there wasn't much time, so he had to prepare. Suddenly Nero struggled inside his jacket. K asked what was wrong just as a man stepped out of the shadows, raising a glowing wand. A sharp slash of green energy cut through the air. K cried out when it grazed his side and fell. 2 attackers appeared, sneering that no one cared if a colorless died. They dragged him to an industrial waste zone. His green-haired attacker grinned viciously and said K was unlucky, because he would be thrown in alive. They stood before a massive pit of swirling toxic ink. K struggled and gasped, demanding to know who they were. The man explained that they had been shocked to find a creature with enough intelligence to follow a human, gesturing toward Nero. His partner pulled out a small cage and said it was a rare find. Nero, trapped inside, cried helplessly as tears fell. Rage surged through K. He lunged and shouted that they should let Nero go. The man mocked him, saying the creature could sell for a fortune and was far too valuable for someone colorless. Fueled by fury, K grabbed the man's arm and warned him not to push his luck. The attacker's expression twisted in shock as his power was torn away, violently absorbed by K, who was suddenly wrapped in a dark aura. In the chaos, K was thrown backward, plunging into the ink pit. His attackers laughed loudly, saying that they were now rich, while Nero cried out in anguish for his fallen companion. As Kay sank into the ink, a distant voice echoed through his mind. It said that it would still accept him and that his true color remained. Something ancient and forgotten stirred inside him. His eyes snapped open, transformed into hollow voids of absolute darkness. From the surface of the ink, a black, shadow-like hand rose, reaching for the world above. A towering pillar of darkness erupted from the pit. The attackers froze in fear. One of them stammered, asking what they were seeing. They screamed as they watched the entire reservoir of ink vanish in an instant. From the empty basin, a figure made of pure shadow emerged, its silhouette only vaguely human. The green-haired man stared in disbelief and muttered that it could not be real, asking if this thing was some kind of creature. Before he could finish, the monstrous shadow lunged toward them. At the scene of destruction, surrounded by rubble, a frantic witness recounted everything to a calm officer. The witness insisted that he had seen it clearly with his own eyes, explaining that his hand had suddenly shot out. The officer took notes and replied that he understood. The man continued, saying that the entire area had been torn apart. He described a massive, clawed shadow hand rising from the ground, an image that still shook him. Nearby, soldiers carried a stretcher holding a gray-skinned man. An officer observed that only those two seemed to have been affected. Another remarked that they were B-rank pioneers with a questionable reputation. A woman with purple hair watched in confusion and said that she could not understand how they had lost all their color. Her red-haired companion brushed off the concern, reminding her that they had come because of the large creature sighting. The on-site supervisor spotted them and gasped. He said that it was an honor to meet a colorist and nervously asked why such important people had come to the Shadow District. The red-haired colorist assured him that there was nothing to worry about and explained that he was simply asked to investigate the creature. He then requested a tour of the site. The supervisor, still flustered, agreed quickly and guided them forward. They moved through the devastation while the red-haired colorist studied black residue on the shattered debris. His companion gestured toward the area, saying that there were indeed traces left by the creature. She added that they had tracked all sightings of large creatures until recently, but for one to appear inside the city outskirts was unusual. She explained that the creatures typically found inside city limits were small and harmless, recalling tiny shadow vermin and bird-like shapes. She speculated uneasily that this might be a new variant. The red-haired man stopped her and warned against making assumptions. He said that the pressing issue was figuring out how to track the creature and admitted that this would be difficult. Elsewhere, in a dark and unknowable place, Kay groaned as he regained consciousness. A familiar small shape was pressed against him. He called Nero's name and pulled the creature into a tight embrace, overwhelmed with relief. He exclaimed that Nero was safe and sighed gratefully. Memories flickered through his mind. The beating, the fall into the ink, and the terrifying shadow that destroyed his attackers. Dizziness hit him, and he clutched his head, muttering that something felt wrong. He stared at his own hands, unnerved by the silence surrounding him. He looked around the pitch-black space and asked how such a place could even exist, wondering why everything was so dark. He called out for Nero to help him. In response, Nero burst into a bright glow, revealing a monstrous world filled with twisted shadow creatures. Kay stared in horror, barely able to comprehend it. He shouted that this place was the Black Lands, recognizing the cursed territory from endless warnings. He remembered that the Black Forest areas were restricted to B-rank pioneers and above, shunned even by fortified cities. A deep growl echoed through the darkness. Dozens of glowing eyes emerged from the shadows. He gasped that they were already surrounding him. Panic surged. He yelled for Nero to run and scrambled back as the creatures closed in. Nero shrieked in terror. One beast lunged, but Nero's light flashed, briefly stunning it. Kay shouted that the danger was real and thanked Nero while sprinting through the swarm. He clambered up a rocky ledge, but another monster pursued him. Nero cried out defiantly and shot downward like a streak of light, striking the creature and driving it back. Suddenly, pain tore through Kay's chest. He looked down and saw a swirling black hole where the beast's attack had hit. The creature screamed. Kay stared at his wound in disbelief, then back at the monster, unable to understand how he was still alive. He touched the wound and realized he felt no pain. He muttered that he was somehow fine, even though he should have died. A shocking realization formed. He said to himself that this must be the power of color. As he tried to understand his new ability, the earth rumbled. A massive, horned shadow demon towered over him, its single eye burning with malice. Nero darted around desperately, trying to distract the giant. Kay fell to his knees under the crushing pressure. He groaned that it was too much, but determination burned through him. Memories of his tormentors flashed before him. Dark energy seeped from his body until he became a figure of complete shadow. He remembered the shadow that had saved him earlier and called on that same power. As the colossal beast roared, shadow-covered Kay charged forward and threw a devastating punch. The explosion tore through the forest, obliterating the monster. When the dust settled, Kay's silhouette remained standing, his eyes glowing fiercely. The darkness retreated, and his hair turned stark white. He stared at his hands in shock. He cried out in disbelief before releasing a raw, panicked scream that echoed across the trees. His strength failed and he collapsed. He gasped, struggling to breathe, saying that his color was slipping away. Wisps of black energy drifted off him. He realized with terror that the power drained him each time he used it. He thought frantically that he would die at this rate. Summoning what strength remained, he crawled to a fallen shadow creature. His eyes shone with desperate determination as he pressed his hand against it, forcing its energy into himself. Color surged back into him. He sat up, panting. He muttered with relief that he was going to survive and stared up at the bleak sky. Back at Mary's workshop, the young woman was busy working when a quiet sound drew her attention. A mysterious figure in a tattered cloak stood in the doorway. Mari turned with a polite smile and asked what brought him in today. The figure remained silent. She asked if he had a special request. When he stepped closer, she backed away nervously and said that he was acting extremely suspicious. She raised a heavy wrench and warned him to stop, shouting that she would knock him out if he came closer. The figure lunged and both of them screamed. Mari yelled for him to stay back just as the figure pulled down his hood. He urged her to calm down and said plainly that it was him. Mari stared at him in disbelief, saying that she could barely recognize him and shouting in shock as she demanded to know what had happened to his appearance. Her voice echoed through the workshop. That shock quickly turned into fury as her hands trembled around her tools. She said that she was furious and that she would never forgive the people who did this. Kay rested a hand on her shoulder and told her that it was all right, insisting that she had already gotten her revenge. Mari slowly lowered her wrench, her anger fading into relief. She admitted that she had gone a bit too far and added that she had been worried since their communication had suddenly stopped. Kay smiled and apologized for worrying her, but said that he was glad she was unharmed. She looked him over more carefully, amazed, and pointed out that black was the color of creatures. She asked whether people would see him in a negative way now. Kay grinned with confidence and replied that his past no longer mattered. What mattered, he said, was that he finally had a chance to become a colorist. He waved her concerns away and said he would head straight to the Pioneer and Core entrance exam. He thanked her for ensuring he got back in time, then asked if he could borrow some clothes. She let out an exasperated sigh and asked why he always needed to borrow things, but a smile crept across her face. She grabbed his hand and pulled him along, saying that he should consider it an investment in the colorist she believed he would become. She told him to follow her and that she had just the right items. Soon after, a massive crowd of aspiring pioneers moved into a grand coliseum where the entrance exam was set to begin. Excitement and nerves buzzed among the candidates. One muttered that the pressure was intense, while another said dreamily that they never imagined taking the test for the Dawn Pioneering Corps. His friend agreed, adding that the Corps was filled with elite S-rank colorists known as the Hope of Shining City. But the path ahead was harsh. Someone pointed out that many powerful candidates were gathered there, from the daughter of a prestigious color lineage to rapidly rising prodigies. Yet one figure drew more attention than the rest. Everyone whispered about him. They said that without a doubt, the most notable participant was Gale, known as Gale's Sword, a green-haired fighter almost guaranteed to pass. Rumors claimed he was strong enough to handle wild creatures alone, though his violent and cruel behavior had reportedly gotten him expelled from a previous corps. One applicant scoffed loudly, saying that there was no reason to be scared of someone like him. His friends laughed nervously, unaware that Gale had heard them. Gale shot them a contemptuous look and said that they were ridiculous brats. He clicked his tongue and said he had expected S-rank quality, only to find such a disappointing crowd. He scanned the room with irritation, commenting that no one impressed him. Then his gaze stopped and his expression shifted. He said that perhaps one person stood out after all. He recognized a stoic blue-haired woman and muttered her name. Ellie Cyan, the second daughter of the Cyan family. A predatory grin spread across his face as he clenched his fist. Suddenly a booming voice filled the Colosseum. A loud announcement declared that the entrance exam for the Dawn Pioneering Corps would begin immediately. All eyes turned to the judges' platform, where several officials appeared led by a legendary yellow-haired colorist. His presence alone made it clear the Corps was serious about new recruits. Excitement rippled through the audience as people whispered that S-rank members truly were on another level. The colorist stepped forward and addressed everyone. He thanked them for applying and said that everyone present had their own goals, whether money, strength, honor, or responsibility. He added that none of that mattered, only skill mattered. His voice sharpened as he said that they required overwhelmingly strong candidates to venture into the Black Lands. Mediocrity had no place among pioneers. He motioned toward the fighting stages and announced that the first test would be a tournament. Combatability, he said, was the most important skill for any pioneer because the world beyond the walls was ruled by survival. He said that the weak would fall and challenged them to prove their strength. The results of the tournament would determine who passed the first round. The announcer called out the first numbers. Number 126. Number 286. Murmurs spread through the arena as Gale stepped forward with a smug grin. People whispered that a heavyweight match was happening right away and pitied whoever faced him. Gale walked onto the platform and stared at his opponent. A figure in a pale cloak with their face hidden. He unsheathed his sword with a sharp ring and said that it did not matter who he was facing. He claimed he had held back out of boredom for too long and that now there was no need to restrain himself. Gasps erupted as his sword began to shine with a brilliant green glow. People said that his swordsmanship at his age was incredible and called him a true prodigy. Gale braced himself, eyes burning with intensity, and announced that his opponent should try to block the coming strike. He warned that failure would mean being cut apart. He launched forward with blinding speed, but number 286 did not block. Instead, the cloaked figure dodged effortlessly and slammed a fist into Gale's side. A deafening crash echoed as Gale was hurled across the stage and smashed into the stadium wall. The crowd fell silent, stunned. People stammered that Gale had been taken down in one hit. In the rubble, Gale coughed in disbelief, asking how such a thing was possible. His opponent calmly lowered the hood, revealing he flexed his hand and muttered to himself that the sudden burst of movement had startled him. A shocked cry rose from the stands as someone shouted that the color was black, the same color as creatures. The judges stared in disbelief, and even Ellie Cyan watched with widened eyes. People questioned whether a human could have such a color and wondered if the overwhelming blow had also been the power of black. Kay stood on the platform completely unaware of the panic he had caused. He glanced around at the frantic crowd, confused, and wondered aloud if he had done something wrong. Later, in another match, a frightened applicant tried to defend himself, raising his staff and begging his opponent to keep away. But Kay rushed forward without hesitation, ignoring every attempt to stall or plead. The applicant stared at Kay in disbelief, saying that his own power somehow had no effect. He cried out in confusion just before a heavy strike from Kay sent him staggering with a choked gasp. A final, crushing blow dropped him to the floor. The announcer's voice echoed across the Coliseum, declaring number 286 the winner. In the stands, several recruiters leaned forward with interest. One remarked that the kid seemed promising and added that he was the first black holder ever recorded. Another recruiter said excitedly that rumors would spread fast, meaning they had the chance to recruit him before anyone else. A sudden voice interrupted their discussion, asking if they were having a tough day. The group turned to see two newcomers approaching. Their eyes widened in recognition as they greeted the imposing red-haired man known as Red. He and his purple-haired companion carried an unmistakable air of authority. Red asked casually if the exam was running smoothly. One recruiter explained that they thought he was away handling a commission. Red sighed and said the commission was going nowhere and that it had been nothing but a hassle. He asked if anyone promising had appeared. The recruiters exchanged excited looks. One assured him that the results were impressive this time. He mentioned the young lady from the Cyan family as well as someone extremely unusual. Red followed his gaze toward the arena and spotted Kay. He muttered the word black under his breath. The recruiter nodded proudly and said he knew Red would recognize the color. He added that Kay had even defeated a top contender and that his acceptance seemed guaranteed. Red's expression tightened. He thought to himself that a new color appearing right after that strange incident was far too suspicious. He decided they would keep observing for now and kept his eyes fixed on the boy below. On the battlefield, Kay felt a surge of confidence as the crowd cheered. He clenched his fist as dark energy drifted around it and told himself that with this strength, becoming a pioneer was finally within reach. But the excitement dimmed when he remembered the terrifying moment he had collapsed, completely drained of color. He warned himself to stay careful. If he overused his power and lost his color again, he might not survive. A sudden chill swept over the arena. On another stage, Ellie Cyan had frozen her opponent solid without effort. The announcer declared number 17 the winner as the crowd murmured in awe. Someone said that the Cyan family's color never failed to impress. Kay stared at her, stunned by the sheer force she displayed. He wondered how anyone could hope to beat someone like that. As Ellie stepped off the stage, she paused directly in front of him, meeting his gaze with icy intensity. He blinked in confusion, unsure why she had stopped. After a long moment, she simply walked past him, leaving him more puzzled than before. A loud announcement cut through the venue, declaring the first exam complete. The candidates were thanked for their efforts and told the next exam would begin immediately since they were behind schedule. As rejected applicants left the arena, the remaining ones gasped for breath. Some complained that they had no time to rest. Others prayed the next part would be easier. The yellow-haired examiner began announcing the next test, but he faltered as Red placed a hand on his shoulder. Red stepped forward with a smirk and declared that he would personally lead the second exam. A wave of panic swept through the candidates. Someone shouted in shock that Colorist Red himself would be in charge. Whispers rippled through the group, recounting his legend as one of Shining City's strongest colorists, famous for reclaiming parts of the Black Lands and holding unmatched subjugation records. Others whispered fearfully that his destructive power was so overwhelming even allies hesitated to work with him. Many muttered that if he led the test, none of them would pass. The examiner leaned in and nervously asked if Red was certain. Red brushed off the concern and joked that he already got yelled at daily. He then turned to the trembling candidates and announced the test. He said it was simple. A menacing grin spread across his face as he said the word, endure. A crushing surge of power exploded from him. The candidates were immediately forced to their knees. Before they could react, each was trapped inside a sphere of blazing red energy. Someone stammered in disbelief. Red explained calmly that he had recreated an environment he had once survived. He warned them that it would get hot. Visions of harsh, lifeless terrain appeared before their eyes. Red told them that the Black Lands were full of environments far worse than this and that compared to those, this was nothing but a warm stove. His eyes narrowed as he repeated that the task was simple. Endure it and they passed. Fail, and they had never been qualified. The heat intensified. One applicant screamed that it felt nothing like a warm stove. Another pounded desperately at the barrier, saying his ability did nothing against it. Then a brilliant flash of cyan burst through the inferno. With a sharp cry, Ellie shattered her fiery prison with jagged ice. Red's eyebrows rose in genuine surprise as he watched. He admitted that this was pretty impressive. The recruiter was left speechless. He said that the Cyan family's color should have been the perfect counter, yet Ellie still shattered the barrier the instant she acted. He muttered that she might truly deserve the title of prodigy. Red's attention shifted toward Kay. Unlike Ellie, Kay was drenched in sweat and visibly shaking, the scorching heat pushing him dangerously close to collapse. Kay's thoughts raced in panic. He needed something to absorb, anything at all. Then the idea struck him. He told himself that the barrier was created through a color ability, and if that was true, he might be able to take it in. A flicker of black energy surfaced across his palm as he recalled absorbing the monster's power before, a feat he still didn't understand. He clenched his teeth, refusing to give in to the heat. There was no time for hesitation. He said internally that he would discover the result by acting, not overthinking. He thrust his hand against the burning wall. From the observation deck, Red's eyes flew open. He muttered in disbelief that Kay was attempting direct absorption. Violent streams of red energy began surging from the barrier into Kay's hand. Nearby applicants stared in horror, asking what they were witnessing. Kay's sphere twisted and collapsed inward, turning into a violent vortex of intertwined red and black. The examiner was horrified, stammering in shock. Even Red was taken aback for a moment, unable to form words. Then a slow, predatory smile crept across his face. He said that they had found a true madman this year. As the barrier shattered, Kay stood at the center of the dissipating energy, surrounded by volatile power and glowing white eyes from overload. As the pressure faded, sweat gathered on his brow. He was still standing, trembling but alive, a strained smile breaking through. In the stands, Ellie watched with wide eyes. She whispered internally that she could not be seeing wrong. She wondered if such a color could even exist in a human. She had trained her whole life to master her family's power and uphold its legacy, always terrified of disappointing her older sister. But now she watched a completely new color emerge before her. She remembered his strength from the earlier rounds, admitting quietly to herself that K possessed power that even she could not guarantee to defeat. Suddenly, Red appeared beside K, lazily throwing an arm around him. He asked aloud why Black behaved the way it did, claiming its pull was ferocious, as if trying to devour everything. Leaning closer, he said he could not hold back his curiosity and asked K to explain Black's nature. K, still dazed, mumbled about the exam. Red brushed it aside with a wave, saying he passed with ease and that he would personally handle the paperwork. From the judging platform, someone snapped at Red, yelling that he was being too loud and causing trouble again. They shouted that the exam was still underway. Red only laughed and said he would deal with the consequences later. The yellow-haired examiner regained control and addressed the arena. He said that due to unforeseen circumstances, the test had been disrupted. However, the exam would continue. He added that all remaining candidates would advance to an additional test, except for number 17, who broke out of the barrier independently. Ellie, applicant 17, narrowed her eyes as she watched Red lead K away down a dim corridor. Outside, near a waiting car, Red instructed his purple-haired partner to wait while he handled something. She agreed without hesitation. Moments later, K gasped as he found himself staring at a devastated district, a field of collapsed structures and broken stone. He stammered in shock as Red surveyed the destruction with a grim expression. Red said it was an ugly sight and explained that 2 pioneers with established colors had recently been drained of everything, turned completely colorless. He showed K images of the victims. It was the first incident of its kind. Red said that eyewitnesses reported seeing a massive shadow creature. He then turned toward K, his voice low and accusing. Not long after that incident, he said, K appeared. The first person ever recorded with Black. He remarked that the timing was far too convenient. K tensed under the weight of his words. Red continued in a hard tone, pointing out that K possessed a power able to consume other colors, something entirely foreign and dangerous. Cold sweat trickled down K's cheek as the implications settled in. Seeing the boy's panic, Red abruptly relaxed his aura and laughed, saying that he was only testing him and that K's honest reaction spoiled the fun. His expression sharpened again as he stated that his real task was discovering what was happening in the district, but that K's ability interested him far more. Red explained that color powers were never supposed to mix. K's ability ignored every rule, every hierarchy. He said he had never witnessed anything like it. He then stopped and looked directly at K. He pointed out that K clearly could not control what he had just done in the exam. K stuttered, unable to form an excuse. Red's eyes glinted with intent. He said that they needed to run a test to understand how far K's ability reached, what it felt like, and how it operated. He extended his arm and, with a challenging grin, told K to absorb his color. K recoiled in alarm, saying it was too dangerous. Red brushed the concern aside and laughed, saying K had no business worrying about him. He ordered him to try. His tone shifted into something sharp and commanding as he said that leaving a dangerous power unchecked could threaten the entire city. K stared at Red's immense aura, then at his own trembling hand. He took a deep breath and agreed. As he gripped Red's arm, he added nervously that if anything went wrong, Red could not blame him. Instantly, a violent torrent of red energy flooded into him. K screamed in pain as the raw force tore through him. Red stood unmoving, observing as the power engulfed them. His gaze sharpened as K's form shifted. Darkness mixed with crimson twisted across K's face, forming a monstrous half-mask. His eyes glowed with savage, unstable power. Red's eye widened in genuine shock. He prepared to intervene, but then saw K resisting the transformation, growling as if wrestling with a voice urging him to take more. He forced himself to push back against the surge. With a final, ragged breath, K suppressed the energy. The darkness receded. Red stared at him, astonished. He said that K had actually suppressed it. K, panting, said that it caught him off guard but asked if that meant the test was a success. A slow, delighted grin spread across Red's face. He said that this was entertaining. Then Red's smile faded into seriousness. He said the test was complete and reminded K that he was the one handling the investigation. He added that K was a prime suspect standing right in front of him. K's heart plummeted. Red continued in a calm, methodical tone. He explained that many powerful figures were invested in the case and that once word spread about K's ability, they would blame him. Red warned that K could face exile or even be reduced to a test subject. K's expression tightened in fear. Red then gave him a sly smile and said that if K came under him, things might turn out differently. Without hesitation, K bowed deeply and said he would be in Red's care. Red stopped him and said he needed to listen first. He warned that he would not fix everything for free and that K would owe him favors. He asked if K could handle that. K almost collapsed with relief and said he would do anything required, smiling with desperate hope. Red's grin widened, his eyes glowing with mischievous satisfaction. He repeated the word anything with dark amusement. A lone shadow creature shuffled across the gray wastes as a deep tremor rolled beneath it. Before it could react, a massive armored carrier thundered past, crushing stone under its wheels and belching dark smoke. Inside the vehicle, K pressed eagerly to the round window, thinking that he had never ventured this far before and that this moment marked his first true step as a pioneer. Across the cabin, the green-haired youth, Gale, eyed him irritably and told him that calling him black hair felt fitting, since K's fidgeting was making him nervous. Gale insisted he stop distracting him and sit down. K backed away from the window, settling beside Gale and Ellie, and told himself that this was exactly the start he had dreamed of. Gale folded his arms and thought that they were teammates now, whether he liked it or not. Ellie watched them both from the corner of her eye, still trying to grasp the reality of the mission. K's thoughts drifted to his prior meeting with Red. He remembered asking whether Red truly intended for him to join an exploration team. Red had replied that he already had a spot in the unexplored zone and needed K's ability. He had laughed at K's nervous expression and assured him he would not be entering the Black Land alone. K remembered how Red outlined the expedition on a map, explaining that all new recruits were scheduled to join the mission anyway and that K would simply be one of them. Red told him to show up on time and follow instructions. Now, riding inside the carrier, K recalled boarding to find Gale and Ellie already waiting. He also remembered how Red's interference forced exam officials to revise the results, giving numerous strong candidates another chance. Ellie, who easily topped the scores, personally requested to join Red's team. Gale's irritation now returned. He muttered that he still could not believe he had been embarrassed by a clueless upstart and insisted he only slipped because he lowered his guard. He warned K not to expect luck next time, adding bitterly that if Lady Lavian had not been behind him, he would have crushed K in the arena. Lavian listened without comment. Ellie finally responded, telling Gale to drop it since he would only be knocked out again. She said K was well out of Gale's league. Gale choked in disbelief. K watched the two spar verbally and wondered if they might eventually get along. Ellie then claimed she would challenge K first. K inwardly panicked, thinking he had never agreed to anything. She explained that their eye contact earlier had sealed the order, and she told Gale that since he had lost, he should stay silent and wait. As the two glared, K stood between them sweating, wondering how he ended up as the target of both. The carrier rolled to a stop near a sprawling installation carved into the Black Land's edge. K stepped out with Ellie and Gale and stared at the chaotic Dawn Pioneer outpost. Workers hauled crates, checked engines, and hurried between stations. K felt odd, thinking that this was the first time he had seen a full S-class mobilization. He realized that compared to the times he entered the Black Land alone, this scale dwarfed everything he knew. A poke to his cheek snapped him from his thoughts. He turned to Mari, who smiled and asked why he was spacing out. He brightened when he saw her, and she said she would never miss his first mission. She lifted Nero proudly, and K thanked her for taking care of him. She waved it off, saying that Nero was family to her as well. She added that working alongside the Dawn Corps was an incredible chance and that her skills were useful here. A call rang out announcing assembly for immediate departure. He handed Nero back to her and told her to take good care of the creature. She warned K not to act recklessly before hurrying off. Nero suddenly wriggled free, jumped from her arms, and sprinted away. She gasped and shouted after him. Far ahead, as K moved into the crowd, Nero slipped into his shadow, creating a dark ripple across the ground. Mari chased after them, confused and calling for K, but he had already disappeared into the sea of recruits. She hesitated and told herself that perhaps this was not a serious issue. Later, the expedition gathered inside a great cavern lit by floodlamps. Arancia stood before them, sword raised, and ordered everyone to prepare for entry into the Black Land. She reminded them that safety came first. Scouts had spotted unknown dangerous creatures in Area 21, and images of fanged beasts ran through their minds. She explained that an A-rank corpse had also been discovered there, marking the zone as highly dangerous. A nervous officer approached and urged Arancia to remain alert. He reported that Chief Red had taken new recruits and abandoned the assigned formation. Arancia stared in disbelief and demanded confirmation. When he nodded, she groaned, pressing her forehead, muttering that it was always him. She then prayed silently for the rookie's safety. Another soldier reported that Red's group was heading toward another direction entirely. Beyond the outpost, a deep ravine stretched open, and from its darkness a pale hand trembled upward. Red led the rookies into that canyon, his red hair gleaming faintly in the shadows. Kay followed closely behind, with Ellie and Gale walking tensely. Kay eyed the jagged cliffs uneasily and thought that this route could not possibly be safe, especially since their team was made up entirely of rookies. He asked why the others followed when Red's invitation had been meant for him alone. Gale clicked his tongue and said he refused to let himself fall behind someone like Kay. Ellie added that Red's training was not something ordinary recruits could receive and that she would not permit Kay to monopolize it. Red laughed and said he never intended to coddle anyone. He told them that with him present, things would not get out of hand, and urged them to keep moving. At the next corner, a swarm of shadow creatures screeched and charged. One lunged at Kay, but Ellie leapt in front, sword glowing with frozen light as she split the creature open. Surrounded by corpses, she caught her breath and thought that the Black Land was far more brutal than anything she trained for. Monsters kept appearing, the air felt suffocating, and she understood she needed to conserve energy and think ahead. She glanced at Kay and told herself she would not fall behind him. She asked him why he never used a spoite, noting that even during the entrance exam he fought empty-handed. Kay admitted he had none and said he assumed he could manage without since they were so expensive. Gale stared at him, stunned. He thought about how spoite weapons allowed pioneers to infuse color into their attacks and how Kay had downed a creature with his bare hands. He remembered their own fight. Kay in a hooded cloak driving a heavy punch into him while his own spoite did nothing. Rage simmered as he vowed to surpass Kay someday. Watching them, Red smirked and thought that only true prodigies clashed this fiercely. He told them they were close to their destination and urged them to push a little farther, then called back that they should finish quickly and go celebrate as their silhouettes marched deeper into the canyon.